Hey y'all, welcome back to Poplar Creek Farm. I am outside today in the snow. This is actually our orchard portion of our farm, and it's very small right now. It will hopefully get bigger, but I wanted to do a little video because we're gonna start looking at what we're going to be purchasing for this coming spring. We do want to expand our orchard quite a bit. We've only got, let's see, 5 apple trees, well, 4.5. One of them, we'll see if it comes back. It was looking kind of pitiful at the end of the year. We've got multiple blueberry, a few blueberry, a bunch of raspberry and blackberry plants, and some elderberry. There were strawberries planted in here. I have no idea if they survived. They didn't really come up very well. So we'll see. We had lost one of our fruit trees, one of our apple trees, to a caterpillar that is common up here. I'm gonna totally blank on the name of it. I will try to look it up and put it in here. Killed one of our nice gala apple trees that I'd gotten from Lowe's. These ones were $30 and they're pretty tall. I mean, I'm short and it's quite a bit above my head. We also had some peach trees that we got free from our realtor. We have at least 3. There might be one more somewhere in here because I had kind of planted them around, and then I have 2 cranberry bushes. But basically my plan is to expand in this area here where there were some peach trees. I'm gonna plant some more. I have more in my basement that we had just potted for the year because they weren't big enough to put outside yet. And then I'm also planning on expanding kind of back and over this way some more with trees. So what else do I want? I've got apple trees, I've got peach trees, elderberries, blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, cranberries. What more could I want? Well, everything. I want it all. I want to plant everything. At least I want to plant some of a lot of different things. So I want pears. That's a big one. I want both Asian and Bartlett pears. Love both varieties. Asian are a big pear. Bartlett is a smaller but really, really nice and sweet pear that I like. And then I also want some cherry trees. I'm not a huge cherry eater, but I want to try to mix them into things, like put them in with different jams and just have some variety, especially when we're going to be primarily eating off of our own farm. It's important to have variety in your life. You need some different stuff. So we've got the apples, and I'm going to get some more varieties of apples right now. I've got 2 Gala, and I have, I think, 1 Golden Delicious and 1 Red Delicious. I have a half a tree of either a Golden Delicious or Red Delicious. I don't remember which one it is at this point. The peach trees are all different varieties. They're basically just ones that he has multiple, our realtor has a huge orchard, and he has multiple different varieties of peach trees. And when they sprout up new ones, he's not sure which one it fell from. And so we'll see when we get them. So I would like also to possibly do like just 2, because you do typically need 2 for cross-pollination, but some plum trees. I don't want to try apricots. They don't grow well in this climate. And I think so that'll be the majority of the trees. I'm sure I'll come up with something else at some point. But we are going to be starting to plan these out. So we need to start looking and figuring out where we're going to get some of these. Now I can tell you right now, I am going to get some more blueberry and some more blueberry, but also more blackberry and raspberry from Tractor Supply. I got them this year from Tractor Supply. I also ordered some from Stark Bros, and the ones from Stark Bros pretty much all died. They actually mostly came dead, which I could contact the company and file a complaint and, probably get some of my money back, but it happens. They were actually all hollowed out, and when we broke them just to see if there was anything in it, maybe there was like a worm or something, it was spiders, which was super weird. And the ones that we got from Tractor Supply produced last year. Now you're not really supposed to let them produce because you're supposed to let them, strengthen. It was unintentional. We'd go over there and be like, oh my gosh, there's fruit on these trees, or on these bushes. So, and we have lots of like wild blackberries as well, but we want to have some more that we can actually know that we're gonna harvest from every year. So we're gonna get some more from those from Tractor Supply. And those apple trees that I got from Lowe's, other than the one we lost from a caterpillar that I saw on the tree and it's common in this area, they are amazing. They look beautiful, super healthy. They're growing super well. So I'm probably gonna get some more. And they were $30. Like, you can go out and get really big apple trees that are gonna produce in a year or 2. These will probably take another 3 years to produce, but $30 versus 50, 60, 70, $80 a tree. kind of worth it in my opinion. The ones I got from the Golden Delicious and the Yellow Delicious I had gotten from Tractor Supply, and they were pretty much sticks. And we lost 1.5 of them. And like I said, I don't know if that half is gonna come back. But the 2 that we did get are doing really well. They're $15 there. They probably won't produce for another 5 or 6 years though. So I do want to get a few bigger ones that'll produce sooner, but I really want to get the orchard kind of established this year so that we are not having to add to that in the future, because they take 4 or 5 years to produce, and I don't want to wait 10 years. You know, I don't want to start planting over the next 4 or 5 years and have to wait another 4 or 5 years from that point to actually harvest something. I want to be able to harvest in the next few years, because that's where we're going to save money. When it sits in the ground, as long as you manage it and take care of it, that's, you know, free produce for the rest of those trees' lives. All right, guys, so I came back inside. It's way too cold out. So what are some things that you have to consider when you're planting an orchard? First of all, if you are brand new to your property, unlike us, try to wait a little bit. I'm the most impatient person. I post this all the time, how impatient I am. And we probably could have laid out the property a little bit better. You want to look obviously where your sun is coming from. We did have to keep it far enough away from the garden. We didn't want it on the south side of the garden because that would potentially in the future block light from my garden. We also didn't want it right by the animals, because I don't want my animals decimating my my crop. And they will. My chickens can get in there. Sometimes the fence is down right now, which isn't a big deal because there's nothing on them. But once spring starts and they start sprouting again, definitely need to get that fenced so the chickens stay out of there, because they'll just eat everything. They'll eat anything, everything that they can get their mouths on. So where on your property you want it is a big part. You also want to think about, you know, do you want it shading your house in the future? Do you not? We don't, because although, you know, in New York State it still does get hot and it would help with our cooling costs, we don't actually have air conditioners. We use a one window unit in our house if we really need it. But we'll have solar panels, and so we don't want the solar panels being blocked at all. Also think about what kind of trees you want, not just variety of fruit, although that's important, and you want to know what kind of fruits, you know, you guys want, you will eat. Also what kind of fruits grow in your area. But what size trees do you want? There are multiple different size trees nowadays. You know, trees have been bred to grow in different sizes and in different areas and different things. So I chose semi-dwarf trees. There are dwarf trees, there are semi-dwarf, and there are standard. Standard are the very large apple trees, or fruit trees in general. I talk about apples a lot because I'm from New York State. We grow a lot of apples here in New York State. The Big Apple, you know. And I will say that's the one I'm most familiar with. So standard apple trees can grow 30 feet tall. And unless you want to be getting up on a really, you know, tall ladder that expands up to 30 feet, that's not realistic for a backyard farmer. Dwarf trees, though, are very small. They typically only get to around 10 feet tall at most. That's actually a fairly tall dwarf tree. Hunter, always getting into videos. But that's if you're not pruning your tree properly, it can get really tall. But even that, like, you don't necessarily need a ladder. Most people don't need a ladder. You may need a little fruit tool to get the apples or fruit off. But they also don't produce as long. So their lifespan is significantly shorter, and their production years are significantly shorter. So I went with semi-dwarf because they're kind of middle of the road. They still get big, but they don't get as big as standard trees, but they still produce longer than a dwarf does. So they're very much middle ground. I think they're kind of perfect for a backyard farmer. Dwarf trees are great. I am not saying they're bad, but their lifespan is typically 20 to 30 years, and they'll stop producing or decrease production significantly after that. Any tree can do that at any point though. So it's totally up to you, you know, do your research and figure out in each actually type of tree. Okay, now Molly. Apparently the cats want to be in the videos today. So you want to look up in your area and for the different varieties of trees that you are wanting to grow, what would be best for you, what would fit your needs best. And then you need to plan your layout of your orchard. And what I mean by that is figure out how much space you need between trees, because when they're babies, you feel like you can plant them pretty close together. But in a few years, when they start to get really big and fill out, you're gonna realize that you could potentially overplant it. So you definitely wanna make sure you have spacing. If possible, look into companion planting and food forests. That's kind of the idea I'm going for in my garden or my orchard. I planted fruit trees, tall fruit trees. Again, they're semi-dwarfs. Typically you can plant, when you're planting like a food forest, it's a large tree, which typically is like a nut tree, then an apple tree or some kind of fruiting tree, then a bush, then, you know, a vining and a ground cover and a root, things like that. So there's all the different levels going down. I don't have nut trees over there at this point. I could potentially plant those in the future. But so right now I've got my fruit tree, and then around the fruit trees is where I have the berry bushes. And that's kind of where what I plan on doing is doing fruit trees with berry bushes. The berry bushes are a variety of actual bush. So blueberries are a bush. Blueberries actually get quite large as well, but they are a bush tree or a bush plant. They are not vining, whereas blackberry and raspberry are a lot more vining. My grapes are by my garden, but I could potentially put some grapes in there too that vine up the trees. And they're supporting each other. They're not taking away from each other necessarily. So that also utilizes my space to the best of its ability. We have 13 acres here, but I actually only have about 2 acres, and my property is like this. We sit up on the hill and it goes down on both sides. So the orchard is going down a hill, which will also help with any runoff, because the trees will help catch that runoff, and the bushes will help catch that runoff. So you want to know what varieties you want to get, what types of trees, size trees you want to get. Lay it out properly. Make sure that you're laying it out with enough space that when you have mature trees, they will still have space. And then also look at diseases. What diseases is your area prone to? We have, like I said, that caterpillar. Let me look it up. Okay, so I believe it was the tent caterpillar, which they're just a small little caterpillar, kind of brown and tan stripes, and they decimate trees. They pretty much kill off all the foliage, and then the tree dies. And we also have funguses in this area. There's a lot of funguses that affect apple trees, and even growing organically, although I am not certified organic, I grow as natural as possible. You can spray with fungicides that are natural. There are natural fungicides that are totally okay to spray on your apple trees, and you actually want to do it as a preventative. If you wait until there's fruit on your tree, first of all, you really shouldn't spray it at that point, and you shouldn't harvest the fruit if you're actively spraying on the fruit. But there's ones that you should do kind of in the spring and in the fall as preventative, because we're very known to funguses on apple trees and on fruit trees in general in this area. So that is something that I will manage. There are copper sprays that help with the fungus, and that's what I will do, and that's totally fine and safe and natural. So look at what varieties are resistant to diseases. So in New York State, we have Cornell University, and they have developed a lot of different types of apple trees. There have been many, many different varieties of apples that have come out of there. And because of that, they're trying to create varieties that are resistant to these diseases and to these pests. And you want to try, I love galas. And if galas were affected by a bunch of different pests and bugs and diseases and whatnot, I'd probably still grow gala. I'd find a way, I'd figure it out, do preventative maintenance as much as possible, because I love galas. That's my favorite apple. And so I don't want to not grow them. So there's going to be some, you're not going to just grow trees that are resistant to things necessarily. Some people might, that's totally fine. If you don't have a huge preference in the flavor or what you're using the apple for, I like galas because they're great for baking, they're great for applesauce, and they are delicious fresh. Whereas I love Empires fresh, but they sometimes get really soft when you're baking, and I don't really like them soft. I like to have them have a little bit of a crisp. So those are why I grow the varieties I'm growing, not only because they are good, with disease resistance. But that's really the things you guys want to look up. And then also, once you are at the point of your planting and you've laid it out, it's all set, start looking into what maintenance these trees require. Fruit trees require pruning. I don't know a fruit tree that doesn't require pruning. It is not so the tree survives necessarily. although it is best for the health of the tree to have it pruned properly, but it is for the best possible production. You want your tree pruned so that, first of all, there's no overcrowding and you can actually access the apples or the fruit in general. But you also want it so that there is adequate ventilation, that there is strong branches. You don't want to allow all the new growth there, because if you've seen, in New York State, we drive by them all the time. There's tons of old orchards that have these trees that they're like spooky looking. They have these crazy long, weird branches coming out, and they actually, a lot of them go down, kind of, the branches kind of face downward, and that's just the way they prune them. But then because they're old trees and they've neglected them at this point, there's tons, thousands of new branches on there. I can tell you those trees are not gonna produce much of anything, because all of that energy from the tree is going into the production of the foliage, the branches and the foliage, instead of the production of a fruit. And so you want to make sure that you are managing those. And I know, again, I'm speaking to apple trees a lot just because that is where most of my knowledge is. But with the apple trees, you do want to go through and thin the trees. The first few years, I am not going to let these fruit. They didn't fruit this year. They did blossom, but I let the pollinators take care of that, and then I took those off because I don't want them fruiting at this point. That's not healthy for them. You want them to produce nice strong roots and get that foliage going before they fruit. You want to give them a couple years. But even still, even when I do have fruiting, when my trees are actually fruiting at this point, I want to go through, if I see clusters of 4 or 5 little apples, I want to pop a few of those off, because you don't want large clusters. First of all, you're going to get a bunch of small apples instead of a few larger ones. And they can, again, compete for nutrition, and it can weaken the tree if you let every fruit go. My parents have had this issue where they've actually had their apple tree has been bent way over, like bent over, because it had so many apples. And that's just, no offense, Mom and Dad, that's just poor maintenance. You do have to thin your trees. As much as it kind of hurts you, it's the same thing as like when you're thinning suckers on tomato plants, and you don't want to do it because you don't want to get rid of any possible production. It's actually best for the production and for the health of the tree. So all those things are really important. Look at the maintenance, look at what each tree, what type of pruning it requires, when the best time to prune it is, and what kind of maintenance it can require. So again, with the apple trees especially, they're prone to the fungus in this area, and so I need to make sure that I'm spraying those for fungus as a maintenance thing, not just as a treatment. It needs to be more preventative. So I hope this helps you guys think about what you need to do when you're planting your orchard. Planting orchards are probably one of the smartest things. I think it's one of the first things you should do when you get onto your property. But again, make sure you're laying it out in the best possible way that you can, so that you're not regretting it, because that's a big investment. That's $30 for a tree, and maybe financially it's not the biggest investment, because let me tell you, my seeds, those add up real quick. But that's a lot of time, and you're gonna get nothing from that if you realize in 2 years that you want to move it. That tree's you're gonna kill it when you try to move it, and you wasted 2 years of it sitting there doing nothing, because they grow, but they're not gonna produce. Instead, make sure you're laying it out properly, thinking about where everything's going to be on your property. Lay out kind of where, irrigation wise, sun, wind, all those things, but get your orchard planted, because again, it can take anywhere from 2 to 5 years for these trees to start producing. And that's a long wait for something that you put in the ground. So thank you guys for hanging out with me today. Remember, we're growing today for a better tomorrow. Please like and subscribe and join me on the next one.